try to sort out, because employers absolutely have the right to enforce workplace policies, and employers also can terminate people for any sort of reasons. But what they can't do is hold one employee to a different standard because they're homosexual. Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Deb, also known as the Silent Lesbian. If this is your first time here to my channel, make sure that you hit that like as well as subscribe button, and more importantly, make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss a beat. Now, I'm sure that you've noticed that things were done a little bit differently today. So this is a new segment that I'm going to put out, which is the Weekly Brief. And the Weekly Brief is centered on lesbian, gay, and bisexual news and issues that are all across the world. Now, I may expand and not just include LGB, but I would say the majority of the hunk that we're going to do is focusing on lesbian, gay, and bisexuals. All right, so we're going to start off with a story out of Brazil. And honestly, this is one that is just completely wholesome. That's why I wanted to start with it. So there's two women. They're named Francella Casca and Luisa Silvero, and they were both on track to become Catholic nuns. They were living in a convent, and they were studying religious life and preparing for what they thought was going to be a life of celibacy and a life of serving Christ. Now, if you think, right, that this is going to be one of those stories where they meet and they instantly fall in love and they live happily ever after, it ain't here. Because apparently when they first met, they didn't even like each other, like at all. And in interviews, they've both talked about how they got on each other's nerves and they didn't exactly hit it off really well. But life has a funny way of doing its own thing, I guess you can say. So over time, both women eventually left the convent and they moved on with their lives. And then years later, they ended up reconnecting and they became friends. And then that friendship eventually turned into something more. And now today, y'all, they're married. And I don't know, I just think there's something really sweet about that. Not because they're former nuns, well, not because it's shocking, right? But because in a world where every story involves homosexual people, it seems to be some giant argument online, and it's nice to occasionally get a story that's just about two people finding somebody they love, right? No lawsuit, no culture war, no drama, just two women who found happiness together. And honestly, that's the kind of story that I want to see more of. And to be honest, I do love the fact, though low key, that they were nuns, because it's so stigmatized, that homosexuals are so stigmatized that choose to still follow their faith. And I love that they're still honoring their religion, their belief systems, and still being the incredible, authentic people that they are. Now we're going to go all the way to Thailand. Y'all, this one is so awesome. The next story is literally one that I absolutely, absolutely love. Over in Thailand, a new pageant called Tom Thailand is getting attention for putting masculine presenting women front and center. About dang time. For those who may not know, the term Tom in Thailand comes from the word tomboy and is used commonly to describe women who present in a more masculine presenting kind of way. And it's actually been part of like Thai culture for decades. And it's often associated with women who love women. And what caught my attention about this story isn't just the pageant itself, it's what it represents, right? It's because somewhere along the way, it feels like masculine women became a disappearing art form. And I hate to say that, friends, but and it's not because they've actually disappeared. They're still here, but it feels, how do I say this? It feels like we don't see them very celebrated very often anymore. Like they're not really celebrated anymore. And when I was growing up, everybody knew what a tomboy was. Everybody knew girls who preferred basketball shorts over dresses, or they hated makeup, or climbed trees, got dirty more. We just felt a little bit more comfortable just being themselves. And for a lot of lesbians, that masculine presenting woman, the butch lesbian, the tomboy, the woman in the suit, has always been a visible and important part of our LGBT community. And lately it just feels like those women are either overlooked, they're forgotten, or sometimes even made to just feel like there's something wrong with them for not fitting traditional expectations of what that femininity looks like. And that is why I love seeing something like this, because these women aren't being told to change. They're being celebrated, right? They're not being told to soften themselves. They're not being told to become more feminine. They're being, like I said, they're being celebrated exactly as they are. And honestly, I think we need more of that. We need more celebratory experiences of authentic homosexuals. It's about seeing all kinds of women on stage, not just feminine women. So, feminine women, masculine women, women who fit stereotypes, women who don't, because there's no one way, there's no one right way to be a woman. The only thing that you have to be is an adult human female. And for young tomboys and masculine presenting lesbians, watching something like this, I imagine, is probably pretty powerful to see people who look like them being celebrated instead of criticized. So yeah, I think Thailand got this one right, y'all, for sure. And I would love to see more spaces where masculine women are recognized. And right here, even, I'd love to see that without, having your breasts cut off or being gender binary or non-binary, or just authentic women owning in their power. All right, y'all. This last story takes place in Louisiana, and I'm not gonna lie to you, this one irritated the out of me. Okay, I'm not even gonna sit here and BS you. There was a man named Scott Moore who's filed a lawsuit against his former employer, which is Lake Charles Memorial Health System, after he said he was fired after an interaction with a patient. Now, here's where things get interesting. Okay, so according to the lawsuit, Moore worked for the health system for about 7 years. And he says he was openly gay the entire time. Everybody knew, the management knew, all the employees knew. Everybody, wasn't a secret. Then one day he was dealing with a patient who apparently got really, really upset. And Moore said he told the patient, "Sweetie, you need to calm down." And that's it. Sweetie. Now, if you're from the South, you're probably already laughing, because down in the South, people call each other sweetie, honey, darling, sugar, baby, about 1,500 other names before breakfast. Now, my grandmother could probably call half the grocery store sweetie, and no one would think twice about it. But according to this lawsuit, the patient took offense and allegedly made a homophobic comment. Now, an investigation followed, and eventually Moore was fired. Now, here's the part that really caught my attention. Listen to this. According to the lawsuit, management allegedly referenced his gay voice when discussing the incident. His gay voice. Not his behavior, not a policy violation, not him beating anybody up. Now, obviously, these are allegations, and the employer is, of course, going to have the opportunity to tell their side of the story. But if Moore is saying the truth, we have to ask this very simple question. Would a straight woman have lost her job for saying sweetie? Because personally, I have a hard time believing that if a 65-year-old Southern grandmother working at a front desk had said, "Sweetie, you need to calm down," would we even be having this conversation? I'd say probably not. We probably wouldn't be. And that's where I think this story becomes bigger than just one word, because the issue wasn't the word itself, but it was who was saying it. That's where there was the problem. The lawsuit argues that other employees routinely use terms like honey, sweetheart, without being disciplined. And if that's true, then the standard wasn't being applied equally. And that's exactly where what the court is going to have to try to sort out. Because employers absolutely have the right to enforce workplace policies, and employers also can terminate people for any sort of reasons. But what they can't do is hold one employee to a different standard because they're homosexual. That's not equality, that's discrimination. Now, whether that's ultimately what happened here is obviously something that the courts are going to decide. But based on what's been alleged, I can absolutely understand why these lawsuits have been filed, because if everybody else gets to say sweetie, honey pie, sugar bunch, then everybody else should be able to get to say sweetie, honey pie, sugar bunch. The rules should be the same for everyone. And that's really what this case comes down to. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What story really pulled to you? Let me know if you want me to keep doing the weekly brief. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and remember, silence ends here.